The hum of fluorescent lights was the only heartbeat left in his world. Inside ADX Florence, the place inmates called the Alcatraz of the Rockies, Dr. Michael Swango counted seconds instead of hours. Once a physician sworn to save lives, he was now a man whose very name sent chills through medical wards and prison hallways alike. Convicted of poisoning his patients, Swango had traded his white coat for a khaki uniform and a 7x12 cell. But for him, isolation wasn't punishment, it was data. If stories like this fascinate you, hit subscribe, because this one only gets darker. ADX wasn't built for redemption. It was built for control. Each inmate lived inside a concrete box sealed by steel doors and electronic locks, no contact, no sound, no human warmth. Here, inmates spoke through vents, traded thoughts in Morse code knocks, and learned to survive on silence. For most, solitude drove them toward madness. For Swango, it became something else, a laboratory of the mind. He began to observe. Guards noted how he'd sit for hours staring into the single slit of light at the top of his wall. When psychologists visited, he spoke clinically, even about himself, as if he were both patient and doctor. The mind adapts, he once said during a monitored session. Even to absence. Especially to absence. But under the calm tone, there was something unnerving. Swango started documenting his daily sensations on prison issue paper: heartbeat changes, appetite loss, altered perception of time. He wrote not as an inmate but as a researcher testing the limits of human endurance. The prison's medical staff quietly referred to it as the isolation study. Unofficial. Unapproved. Unstoppable. Rumors spread through the staff wing that he was manipulating the psychological evaluation process, feeding the system exactly what it wanted to hear to avoid being transferred to the prison hospital. Others said he was experimenting on himself, starving for days, then fasting from sleep, to study the breaking point of consciousness. Even among the most dangerous inmates, terrorists, serial killers, gang leaders, Swango's stillness was more frightening than violence. The guards said he never blinked at screams echoing through the night. One described it simply: he looked like he was taking notes while the world went insane. One morning, a correctional officer discovered something taped behind his cell mirror, tiny handwritten charts showing changes in his pulse and mood over 40 consecutive days. The last line read, Day 41, perception fragmenting. Pattern observed. Proceeding. The officer turned it in, and within hours, the warden ordered a psychiatric review. But when they opened Swango's cell, the papers were gone. He sat motionless at his desk, eyes fixed on the wall. When asked where the notes were, he only replied, "They're not gone. They're internal now." That was the moment ADX realized, whatever study he was running, it wasn't just about isolation. It was about control. And what came next would force the entire prison to question who was really losing their mind. The day the lights flickered in Swango's unit, every guard remembered it. For 12 seconds, the supermax fell into near darkness, just enough for the inmates to start banging on their doors, shouting, clawing at the air. When the backup power returned, only one cell remained quiet, Swango's. Inside, he sat in perfect stillness, his notes spread like surgical instruments across the table. He had labeled the blackout uncontrolled variable. ADX Florence prided itself on absolute predictability, timed meals, timed showers, timed words. But Swango had learned how to exploit routine itself. Every guard rotation, every hallway echo, every vibration in the air vent became part of his study. He wasn't merely enduring isolation, he was dissecting it. He began to test boundaries that weren't physical. Using the limited tools available, memory, breathing, focus, he charted the stages of mental disintegration like a scientist watching mold grow under glass. In his letters to prison psychologists, he described waves of mental silence and temporary detachment from linear thought. The tone was detached, professional, chillingly calm. Then, strange things began to happen around him. Guards started reporting headaches and vertigo near his cell. One officer said the man would stare straight through the narrow slot in his door and it felt like he was studying me. Others thought he was manipulating them, finding subtle ways to provoke unease, smiling faintly at unpredictable moments, whispering something inaudible as they passed, maintaining that eerie composure no matter what chaos surrounded him. The prison's lead psychologist, Dr. Jenkins, decided to test Swango's research. During a monitored session, she asked him whether he still saw himself as a doctor. He smiled. "Every environment is a clinic," he said. "The only difference is the consent of the patient." When she asked who the patients were this time, Swango just replied, "Everyone within 50 feet. After that, Jenkins requested to end the session early. Her report described a profound manipulative intelligence capable of inducing paranoia without direct threat. The warden ordered all staff to minimize interaction. Swango was cut off from correspondence and study materials. But that only made him more unpredictable. His behavior shifted. He stopped writing, stopped talking, even stopped eating regularly. His cell remained unnervingly clean, organized to surgical precision. Inmates nearby began to deteriorate faster. One in the adjoining cell claimed he could feel Swango thinking. Another tried to block the air vent with tissue and muttered, "He's inside it." Guards dismissed it as paranoia, until the inmate suffered a nervous collapse and was transferred out. A quiet fear settled over the unit. Isolation was supposed to break men, but somehow, Swango seemed to be mastering it, bending the psychological pressure back outward. Weeks later, during a surprise inspection, officers found something new scratched faintly into the concrete beneath his bunk. It wasn't words, it was a pattern of symbols, drawn with deliberate precision. When photographed and analyzed, the design resembled a human brain, mapped into quadrants labeled observation, control, adaptation, and decline. No one could confirm whether he carved it during the blackout or after, but one line stood out beneath the markings: "The mind cannot be imprisoned if it learns to observe the self from outside itself." That phrase spread through ADX like a ghost story. Guards stopped volunteering for his unit. Psych staff rotated assignments weekly. Even the warden started keeping the lights in Swango's cell on 24/7. But what none of them knew, what kept one officer awake for nights after reviewing the footage, was that in one corner of that recording, Swango's reflection appeared to move half a second out of sync. The experiment, it seemed, had reached a new stage. By the third year of his confinement, Dr. Michael Swango had become less an inmate and more an equation no one could solve. Guards spoke of him in whispers, as if saying his name too loud might summon him. The warden, once proud of ADX's control over every human variable, began to suspect that control itself was what Swango had been studying all along. In 2003, a new mental health initiative swept through federal prisons, evaluating long-term isolation's psychological effects. ADX officials reluctantly chose Swango as a case study. 3 psychiatrists from Washington flew in to conduct interviews. They found a man calm, articulate, and disturbingly self-aware. He greeted them with a phrase that froze the room: "Welcome to my experiment." The psychiatrists thought it was metaphorical until he began quoting their previous studies, their own phrasing, even personal details from their research he could not have known. Somehow, from inside a concrete box, Swango had accessed or reconstructed their methods through pattern recognition, memory, and deduction. It wasn't supernatural, it was precision. Isolation had sharpened him. When asked how he survived years without human contact, he explained, "Most men resist solitude. I embraced it as feedback. Every heartbeat, every echo, every flicker of the light became a data point. Over time, the cell stopped being a cell. It became a mirror." One of the doctors, unnerved, asked what he saw in that mirror. Swango paused, his voice softening for the first time. "A mind unbound," he said. "You study madness. I studied adaptation. The difference is perspective." By the end of their visit, 2 of the psychiatrists recommended continued observation. The third, Dr. Jenkins, refused to return to the unit again. She wrote in her report, "Prolonged isolation may not have broken him, it may have restructured him." Soon after, security staff noticed Swango had stopped responding to his name. He moved only when meals arrived, eyes open, fixed somewhere far beyond the room. But his pulse, breathing, and routine remained precise. It was as if he had vanished inward, leaving the body behind. Weeks later, during a mandatory health check, officers found him still seated at the desk, posture perfect, papers neatly arranged. On the top sheet was a single line written in immaculate handwriting: "Observation complete. The subject and the environment have reached equilibrium." He was alive, but unreachable. The prison's medical team classified it as a catatonic state. Yet, unlike typical cases, Swango's vitals showed no stress, no degradation. Just stillness. Controlled. Chosen. Rumors spread that ADX had birthed something new, a man who had learned to dissolve into the structure meant to contain him. For some, it was a cautionary tale of intellect gone too far. For others, it was proof that the mind could evolve even under total confinement. The warden later admitted in a rare interview, Swango didn't escape ADX. He became part of it. Like the walls learned to think. Today, his cell remains occupied, but by no one who claims to have seen him speak again. His files are sealed, his notebooks classified under psychological research archives marked restricted access. No one knows if he ever truly broke. Some say he succeeded in mapping the human mind's response to absolute isolation. Others believe he simply disappeared into it. What's certain is this: ADX Florence was built to contain bodies. Swango proved it could never contain the mind. If you think this story was intense, the next one will leave you speechless. Subscribe for more true crime stories that'll keep you on the edge of your seat.